love of improv. I'm your host, Katie Welsh.
And I'm Jessie Wicks.
And today we're talking about clowning with our guest, Chad Damiani.
Welcome, Chad.
Thanks for having me, you two. Nice to see you, Katie. Nice to meet you, Jessica.
Yeah, thanks for being with us today.
So Chad is a clown and an improviser. He's based out of LA, and he's one of the LA's contemporary clowning pioneers. He's performed over 600 shows in the groundbreaking improv clown duo called Jetzo. He's an original member of the Murge from the former flagship show, The Idiot Workshop. And he's in Dr. Brown Builds a Show at the Lyric Hyperion. This ensemble appears on FX comedy show Cake. He also works as a clown consultant and performer for Spiegelworld, the largest circus company in America.
He also recently served as a clown choreographer on the upcoming TV show The Broadcast, produced by the Duplass Brothers, and founded and performs in Clown Zoo, a weekly outdoor event that mixes clown and theatrical mask. Chad has traveled all over North America teaching and performing his clown-inspired stand-up routines. One of his characters appeared on the 2020 season of America's Got Talent. We're super excited to welcome Chad Damiani to the podcast. Welcome, Chad.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on.
Yeah, our first question that we ask everybody is more improv related than clown related, but I feel like it's kind of a double-edged sword question. We always ask, why did you show up to your very first improv class? And then what made you come back? But also, like, same thing with clowning.
Oh, and I do have a long, I wouldn't say storied history. I wasn't very good when I started, but I started in long form improv. Before ever doing any clowning. I mean, I think I had more clowning in my life because I used to work in pro wrestling, and now looking back, that was very much like physical storytelling. But I guess it was over 15 years ago. I don't know the exact date, but the person I was dating at the time started taking classes at Upright Citizens Brigade. So she was an actress. And she had to go see 2 shows a week as part of the curriculum. And I saw a team called the Smokes, who still perform on occasion out here. They've been together forever. And I had never seen long form. I'd gone to some short form shows over the decades previous and thought they were fine. But this long form thing I thought was super interesting. And it wasn't much longer. I think she got to 301, and then finally I signed up for 101, having been to a bunch of shows. And I think this is true about improv, which I think is different than other artistic ventures, in that a lot of times, like, you go to a concert and you're like, I want to be David Lee Roth, or I want to be Stevie Ray Vaughan. But I think when you go to like a class show in improv, you're like, I'm funnier than that guy. I can at the very least.
Yeah,
I'm better than that one. Like, I can certainly do this. Like, that was kind of my reaction, I think.
Yeah, and I feel like if you can just get over, like, if you have no problems performing in front of people, like, you don't need to learn the guitar or anything. You just need to get your ass up there.
Right. And I think improv, part of the explosion was pretty quick gratification. I mean, pretty quickly you could go up with an ensemble and have some fun and get people laughing, whereas so many other things, it's just clown very much was that, like, clown took a lot longer I used elements, but it was a long time before I was felt like I could just do straight clowning. And
what made you even think about clowning?
Well, I mean, it's sort of a bittersweet story, which I'm happy to tell. But that same person I was dating, we'd been in a long-term serious relationship, and she ended up getting terminal cancer. Yeah, and I was still improvising and doing sketch, mostly at UCB. And when she passed away, I went back to improv. Like, now I was like, oh, I want to fill my time. I started going to IO West, which no longer exists, and taking classes. And I was on like 20, in LA at that time, it was a real explosion of independent improv. You could play every night. There were poorly attended shows every night. And honestly, the thrill, before that had happened, improv certainly was scratching the itch. But after, when you sort of like something like that, when someone passes away in your life, it's such a huge failure. And I don't mean in the sense that I did anything wrong, but it's so catastrophic that the idea of like, oh, what if I forget what hospital we're in the scene? Like, okay, I didn't give a shit anymore, and so I was like, oh, I just wanted to feel more. And there was a group that was traveling all around the indie scene at the time called Wet the Hippo, which was a group that kind of was the first like star students of the Idiot Workshop, which is the Idiot Workshop is essentially, it's clown inspired, but it's more like a Buffon style, but it's very much all the rules of clown, interacting with the audience, playing with absurd ideas. And so I was doing all these shows with like 40 teams, names of which I cannot even remember. We didn't even practice or anything. And this group would go up at these indie shows, and either they'd have the best show of the night or the worst, like such a disastrous show. And it seemed like they were having more fun when it was going poorly. And I was just so taken by this. Like, I was just like, and then, something which I'd never done before, like I'd gone to shows at like major theaters, but I started going to like, I'd see where they were at and just go watch them play. And I just couldn't figure it out. And at one point, now it's a pretty big school here, but at this point, the ringleader, John Gilkey, was just teaching drop-ins and an occasional class. And so I went to a drop-in, and when I got in there, I hated it. Like, it was just, everyone was acting up a fool and just like making noises and like doing like weird body stuff. I'm like, this is so stupid. And John was yelling at everyone, and he threw his shoe at a couple people and hit them with his shoe. Later I'd find out that this was like, he knew these people quite well, and this was all part of this, but I thought he was just picking on people. And so I was a little older than everyone else, and I kind of stood up to him, and I was just called him a bully, and like legitimately.
Wow.
And he was just delighted that I didn't get it. Like, I thought he was delighted that I stood up for myself, but he was delighted that I was so clueless to the game that was being played. And he asked me to go behind the curtain, and he said, come out here, and without saying a word, show us that you mean business, right? I was like, okay. And I came around the corner, and I did my best to look serious, and everyone laughed at me. Like, and it was so shocking to me, like this had happened. And also in that moment, I was really mad because I felt like I had defended these people. I had no clue what was going on. I was like, I defended you all, like this and that. And I left that night. I was with you had mentioned Jetzo. I was with Juzo Yoshida, who I'd been doing 2-person improv with. And I was like, I'm never going back, and screw them. And then like every day there would just be one moment where I'd be like, but why did they laugh? Like, it was such a good laugh. Like as I got further and further away from my feelings being hurt, this laugh was just a belly laugh. Like, it was just like that kind of laugh we all just chase. And I was like, why were they laugh? Like, why did I get that laugh? And so eventually, my pride calmed down a little, and I went back, and then slowly I started to see the infrastructure, the architecture of what they were creating, and like what is also true in clown, of this sort of, you create this world for the audience where it seems like the stakes are very high, but you're doing the dumbest stuff, and like you're juxtaposing these two ideas, and you're creating a much more visceral, like emotional experience for the audience that they really like. They might not even understand intellectually what they've watched, but they have gone on a journey with you. And I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. I was like, that seems much more dangerous. That seems much more vulnerable. That seems rife with possibilities of like real big success and big failure. And then, I still improvise. I mean, like I have clown bits I do, but a ton of it is just improvised clown. And trying to find that sort of spark in the moment, just like any improviser, but holding myself to what I think, and I don't mean this as a shot on improv, a higher standard of the audience kind of going through something with me, something transformative, you know?
Yeah. I love that. I love that that is so intertwined with, you know, what happened in your personal life and how kind of clown helped you through that. Um, so I went back, and because I have taken a couple of workshops of yours, and one of the bonus things that you did was that you would send some of your thoughts in through emails. So I've taken some quotes that from there, just so we can kind of, because there's some really good things. I really appreciate how you put this, and I feel like it highlights.
I'm glad someone read it.
So yeah, so I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about sort of the difference and the overlap between improv and clown, and you've mentioned some things, you know, particularly like being in the moment. But I found this quote that you said, I'll just read it. Clown isn't based in form. A big part of what we do is creating new approaches to presentation. There's no improv rule that says we have to make it all up. We can come with silly ideas and costumes, play tricks on the audience before they enter the theater. We can create something unique and find ways to maximize our creative potential.
You know, that quote in particular was something that became apparent to me very early in my journey. You know, this team Jetzo, which you mentioned in the open, we had been doing standard 2-person improv, and we've been having a really, you know, pretty good time of it, but I wanted to add all these clown elements, and Juzo thought clown, like Juzo was not a native English speaker. So the idea of being more physical and playful. And I think what I was taking from improv at the time, and it was a different time, and is that there's like, you know, it's this idea of like teamwork, and this idea of like, we're going to build something together. And in the pursuit of getting as many people as possible to be able to have the same universal skill set, that anyone can go on stage, which I think, by the way, is a delightful idea. Just no different than basket. Like, oh, if we can agree on the rules, then I can play basketball with anyone, you know. But in that pursuit, like a lot of sort of things kind of stuck in the sense of like, well, don't go too far outside the lines. Because we're all trying to agree here. We're all trying to build a universe together, and we're all like, and this idea of agreement, and the idea of like, we're all like, it's this idea of cooperation, which I think is important. But in clown, like presentation and like the end product, I think holds more gravity than the idea of the players themselves having this safety net of like, hey, we're all going to stay within these bounds so we can build things together. You know, I think the intentions are good. And with that group Jetzo, when we started taking these clown classes, and we took some idiot classes very early on, because they talked a lot about breaking rules and, you know, surprising the audience, I was like, I want every show we do, we break a different rule. Like, I just want to see what happens when we break this rule. And we added costumes, and immediately people loved it. Like, we would wear these, we were like the idea was we were a father and son team, even though Juzo's older than I am. We're both neither of us young. And so we would wear these Japanese jimbes, which are these like festival outfits. And we had like these tenenguis, which were these colorful scarves. And the minute we walked on stage in these outfits, people got excited. Like, they immediately, whether they were going to love it or hate it, knew they were going to see something they didn't expect. And I think in improv leans heavily on expectation. You know, a lot of times, you know, in a place like LA, and I would imagine in a place like Reno, you know, your major audience base are often people who've taken improv classes. And so in some ways, we're like teaching them how to watch us play. Yeah. So that they can be like, oh, that was a good move. Like, oh, look what they did. They brought it back. And like,
it's a sport. Yeah. It's like almost like a sport. Yeah.
It's a sport, and it's like, we understand it and this and that. And in clown, we play with the idea of like creating rules on the spot and then subverting those rules, like immediately saying like, oh, this thing that we built for you, we're going to knock it down. And now what are we going to do now? And
well, and I have to say, like, because, you know, when I took especially your in-person workshop here in Reno, I loved that. So basically the workshop was a 3-day workshop, and it culminated in a show on the last night. And and we, I love that you were like, okay, so you're gonna partner up, and you're gonna know who your partner is, and and then I'll call you guys up and you'll do your thing. And we're like, oh, okay. And so then we all like broke and like went home and had dinner and then came back for the show. And then everybody's like, what, did you get any like thing saying like who your partner is or who I'm performing with? And no, we didn't. And like it was, and so what I loved about that was like, and that's the point, like, so you don't have time to think about it. I do find, with improv, like you say, like with all the rules, I get so in my head. And then, usually when you get in your head with improv, you kind of do a shit performance. And so that just totally, there is, like, Jess and I talk a lot about this with improv, where it's like, oh, there's this free feeling, and that you get all these sort of like therapeutic benefits from it. But to me, clown was even a step further, where it was like, talk about being in the present moment. It was just like, you don't, there's no planning, there's no, at least the way you set us up for it, there's just, you just do it. And that was a deeper, more satisfying, for me anyways, feeling of just pure joy, because I'm such a person in my head anyways in real life, and you just don't, there's no time to decide, you just do it. And so anyways, I just really appreciated that about your workshop. So
I'm sorry, Jessica, you make your point. I'll say it after. Make your point.
Oh, I was just thinking what that brings up for me, and I don't have any experience clowning whatsoever. I just do improv, but I do play improv with my kids. And one thing that I kind of always think to myself is, oh, when they're old enough to understand the rules, it'll be so much more fun. And I was thinking about that today, like, oh, well, they never, like, they don't understand agreement yet. They're just having fun and doing whatever, but they're always just laughing and cracking up and having just like so much fun. And I think that if I were to be like, no, but there's rules to how we're playing, like it would ruin that. And so like, when you're talking about like having a form of improv that just like goes beyond the rules, like I think watching my kids play, I can kind of understand that a little bit. Kind of unprogramming human or adults to kind of almost play like kids again,
That's a big element of it too, is like, we talk a lot about something called state of play. And you spend most of your time, especially with people who are early on their journey, getting them just to be present and joyful and connected, like that, like to be seen and stuff. And like, that is not always a priority in improv training. Like it starts very much with, I think maybe a level 1, there's a lot of games and stuff. Then like immediately, like, okay, well, you have all that, but guess what? Like, this is what a tag, this is what a wipe is, this is what this means, this is a good way to respond to this. And like, it very quickly goes back to like the rules. And you talk about sports, and I think it's a good analogy, because when you get really good at sports, you have this muscle memory. You kind of understand the rules, and you also are trying to figure out ways to sort of work around them, maybe not necessarily cheat and stuff like that. And in clown, the first thing I try to do when I work with people is simply get them to be present. Just be present and be playing.
Yeah.
And just watch how the audience reacts to you. Like, that's enough proof, because they love it. They love watching people in motion and having fun and seeing them like regret their decisions, but like seeing it all play out on their faces and in their bodies, and not in the back of their brain where they're trying to calculate how to fix things or what's going to come next.
Do you feel like you play differently in front of an audience than when you're just like practicing with your group? Like, do you respond to the audience based on how they're responding to you and change the way you play?
Well, it's what you're talking about is just an interesting thing in general, which is in clown, there's not like, we always had a direct, like we would always be playing for each other. Like, we wouldn't, like in a clown rehearsal, for me, I don't want to speak for all like direct clown directors, there would be very little time for a director to simply watch all the players on stage together playing, because then that throws off the paradigm, because then it's an audience of one. So now everyone's playing and they're trying to please one audience member, which is the director. So what is more common is you get like a big group and you take turns and you watch each other, right? You watch each other so you can react and you can see how your behavior is affecting the room and stuff like that. I think one of the major issues with improv is sort of coaching culture, which I think is good. Like, I think it's good to kind of work on things. I just think they work on the wrong things. Like, I don't think teams should be meeting for 2 hours and running 4 shows for one person. I think that throws your rhythm off. Like, and also that, it's like, I think you'd be better off having a 3-hour rehearsal with 3 teams, or like a 2-hour rehearsal with 3 teams and each performing for each other, where you can kind of watch or just work exercises, I mean? Work entrances, work exits, work, just work on sort of taking that filter out and saying something and dealing with the consequences. But we were training, go back to Jetzo, which was really where I started to combine improv and clown. And, we did a lot of like traditional improv shows and festivals. And we had a wonderful coach / teacher named Rich Tallarico, who was part of something called Dasa Risky, which is like, in sort of the pantheon of improv groups, is a huge deal group, like we were really lucky to train, and we trained with him for a year, and we did learn a lot. And a lot of, to his credit, a lot of what we did was just work on object work and being present and making choices. But it came to a point where I was like we're kind of being contrary to what our goal is, which is to connect with an audience. We're not doing this to please ourselves, and just like, we're here to react in the moment to the choices we make based on how the audience reacts, not how on each other,
Yeah, and I feel like, well, at least from my perspective, that is one of the main differences, and feel free to give your own opinion here, but between clown and improv, because in trying to figure out what clown is in contrast to improv, to me, that the audience is a huge factor in clown, because you kind of change what you do based on audience reaction, and we'll get into talking about sort of winning and failing and all that, but it's, to me, the audience is major in clown, whereas in improv it's more of a passive role. And then I was also going to say real quick too, just on what we're talking about here, is I do notice that when I do a scramble, like when I participate in a scramble with people who I don't usually perform with, who I haven't had any rehearsals with, sometimes those are the best shows, because I am not in my head and I don't know the players as well, and it's just more spontaneous and there's more just natural reaction. So I feel like that's kind of,
and also, Katie, more risk, like,
yeah.
And I think it's sort of, risk is one of these very odd qualifiers that's like, just the audience watching you, knowing you do not play with these people and you do not practice with these people, and knowing that your chances of success, at least perceptively, are lower, creates risk. And so whether you know it or not, the people watching you are also more activated just by the nature of what a scramble is,
Yeah.
Could you just give like a brief for our listeners who don't really understand what you mean when you're saying like live directing or clowning? What was the exact term? Live directing?
Yeah, live directing.
Can you just give like a really brief overview for them, just exactly what that is and what you do there?
And it's important to, and I'm glad you called that out, Jessica, because live direction isn't all of clown. Like, a lot of clown is Cirque du Soleil or Spiegelworld, or or people doing solo acts, but especially for the purposes of improv, like if you want to kind of go up and perform clown and improvise clown, something that I learned in Los Angeles, something I did with the Idiot Workshop, something I did with a guy named Dr. Brown, who's a wonderful famous clown that ran the lyric Hyperion, was the idea that clowns take the stage and then you have a director who is guiding that clown and talking aloud and implicating that clown and celebrating that clown and adjusting their performance. And in a devise, so in clown, sometimes you have a live director just to devise. So let's just say you're building a clown show, you get people to come and you go on stage with a few ideas, and this live director kind of helps you shape the ideas right in front of an audience. And so there's a lot of failure, but then the audience gets to see the moments of inspiration that will eventually lead to your show. But then there's something that, and I do that, but what I do more often is something performative live directing, where it's sort of presented as if it is a series of exercises or clowns going up, but in actuality, it is a show. And I, as the director, am a major part of the show, sort of, kind of playing the playing the high status character, implicating the clowns, scolding the clowns. And then the audience begins to root for the clowns in spite of me or to spite me. And so, so that's kind of, and this is something that, at Reno Improv, that was our class show, was we took all the clowns and I brought them up and under the guise of a class show, and I just kind of ridiculed them and made fun of them. And then they eventually won the audience over to spite me. The audience cheers the clowns because they don't like me. And they want the clowns to be in charge because the clowns are more fun than I am. And so that's kind of, that's being reductive, but that's kind of the basic idea with most live direction, is you create a status figure who keeps the show on the rails. So secretly, this is the person making sure the show is even and sort of develops in a way that it doesn't lose control. But in the perception of the audience, that's the person that these clowns have to overcome to get to them.
It's basically like you're diverting the attention to, you're creating empathy with the clowns through someone who is overly unempathetic.
Right.
You're creating an emotion. It's probably hard to be that person, the person that everybody's kind of rooting against all the time. Does that ever bring up?
I love it. I
was gonna say, I think
I love it.
Depends on the person.
I do know clowns that do not like it and want to they're like, but I want the audience to like me. I'm like, they love you for hate because you let them hate you.
They love to hate you.
They love to hate you, and they appreciate this role that you're playing. Also, I would say, as I mentioned earlier, I came from professional wrestling.
Oh yeah. Where
the job of the bad guy is a vaunted, respected job. The guy who loses and the guy who ultimately, puts over the good guy, or, that's the ring general. That's the person who's running things. They're, normally in a wrestling match, depending on the experience levels of two wrestlers, it's the villain who's calling the match from in the ring. Because most of pro wrestling, not so much now, but in the old days, it was all improvised. They had a couple story beats, and it would be the villain who would kind of feel the audience and build up their frustration and tension and build to the moment where the good guy or baby face would then kind of overcome and pin them and ultimately win. So that was a position of stature to sort of be the bad guy and get the boos. And I can tell you from those days, most of wrestlers, even the most popular good guys, wanted to be bad guys because it was just a more intimate relationship at times with the audience than being cheered. And
it is a more vulnerable position. A lot of times the more vulnerability you give, the bigger the reward can be, even if it's in the form of booing or hatred. You're getting that emotion you're pulling emotion out of people, and it doesn't always have to be happy emotion for you to create an experience for people.
Well, I'll even go deeper on that, Jessica. This is something an audience doesn't realize, and it's good that they don't, is your job is to make them feel deeply. Because the deeper you can get them to feel anything, the deeper they will laugh, right? An audience is guarded when they come into a theater. They kind of have decided how much of themselves they're going to give to the performer. And so if you go out there and you're just well, I'm just here to make you laugh, there is a cap on that. There's a ceiling on that. But if you outrage them, if you make them tense and nervous, if you make them feel other things, you're just kind of loosening it all up to go deeper. And then you get that laugh, that real like out of control laugh where you've taken away their composure, and then they just have a more full experience. I have something for you, Katie, that you might like. I ended up getting super busy. Like I'm working on a TV show right now, and like, but like I thought I was just going to be teaching through June, right? So I also agreed. A school / theater down here called West Side Comedy has a Monday night house team night, and they had open auditions for the first time in their history. So you didn't have to have taken a class; you can just audition. And so my friend Deidre, who's a clown in that community, was like, "Let's bring a clown show in and see if we can get on house team night." And I was like, "Okay, we're going to come in, and all we're going to do is we're just going to be disgusted by improv, like because there's not going to, everyone's treating it so like, warmly, and and we're going to wear costumes and makeup, and we're going to play like grimy Venice Beach performance artists who don't like think this is disposable art." And of course we got like, they loved it because it's like because we were playing off the expectation created by every other team. So every other team was doing the work for us, and that when we came out, the expectation had been built. But what I was going to tell you was what I've been experimenting with at that show is flipping your what's your group called again? Something Friends?
Sensitive people.
Sensitive people. Okay, Something Friends. I shouldn't have their word.
Your friends are sensitive people, right?
Sensitive people. I flipped it just as an experiment. So I let them start. So I'm directing it, and I let them start by doing absurd improv. Mm-hmm. And then after a few minutes of that, when the audience is uncomfortable, because they're like, I mean, they might be laughing, but they're like, oh, this is so wild, I can't get my head around it. I stop the show and I pick one moment of something they created in absurdity, and I try to overground the moment. Like I try to add so much texture and groundedness to this moment that it ends up being more absurd than the absurdity.
Yeah.
Right. So, because that's where I'm at. Like, I'm just trying to figure out how to do this from every direction. And it has been very successful that you end up with some scene that was a throwaway scene in improv where someone's like, oh, I hurt my hand. And by the end, someone's like putting in an Oscar-worthy performance about their broken hand and how their life is over. And like, there's all these people moving in the back, like, and the audience loves it. Like, the audience loves to see nonsense taken very seriously.
Yeah.
And built to like something that does like almost feel like this is theatrical.
Right.
This stupid thing has, so yeah, we flipped it the other way. And so it works both ways. It's just, you have to create an expectation. So you guys are creating an expectation of groundedness and fleshing out character, and then you get to play. And then we creating chaos. And then we are trying to find order. And in finding order, it's something even wilder,
Yeah.
Just for time's sake, we need to move on to our concept of the day, which is one of our segments here. It's our concept of the day today is called flopping, and it's pretty new to me because I'm pretty new to clowning. So I'm just going to kind of like read about it and see what you think about it. Maybe you can throw in your 2 cents. So we looked up a TED Talk from Alex Bell, who is a former UK actor turned clown teacher. And he says, quote, why clowning is the most important thing ever in acting training. The flop is when if I do an action and it doesn't get a laugh, that would be a flop. And then what I can do as a clown is play the flop that I acknowledge that I didn't get a laugh, and that gets the laugh. I don't know if this quote is right on. He must have been speaking. This is
it's not the best.
Yeah, this is the clown's currency. You're going in and out of failure and in and out of flop.
So what he's saying is like you do something that doesn't get a laugh, and then, which is the flop, and then by acknowledging it in a funny way, I guess, or not funny way even, then that is actually like acknowledging the failure that actually gets the laugh. Does that make sense?
Yeah, this is, and again, I'm sure like as a TED talk, it made more sense, like not to.
Yeah, it's kind of out of context.
Maybe I was reading it wrong. Maybe my brain doesn't.
No, the quote is worded weird. But
so yeah, the flop, the failure, being in the shit, like there's a bunch of terms for it. Essentially, so let's define failure and success, because I think that's important to define the flop. So a success is doing something and getting the intended result. And failure is doing something and getting the unintended result. Like if you, go to, boil eggs and you end up like flipping the pot over, that was unintended and that's not what you wanted, and you failed at hard boiling eggs. So the flop is making an offer with an intention. It sounds like in this particular case, the offer is to get laughter or to get the audience to, be on your side. And then so you committed to this intention, it happens, and you get the unintended result, which is silence or a groan. And what he's saying is, in that moment, if you can be present, not even like necessarily be funny, but if you can acknowledge that you understand that this has failed and you have failed the audience, like not in a way that you have to feel shame, but like that you're like, oh, you didn't like it, and now it affects the performance. Like I'm affected by this moment. That's how important you are. This offer was important, and your reaction's even more important. For the clown, this is a huge moment. This is a moment of connection, right? I did something, I made an offer, you responded that no bueno, you did not like it. And now I respond taking responsibility, and taking responsibility sounds serious. I mean, taking responsibility can just be a little smirk or just being frozen or just looking around and be like, oh no, but we love that moment because then we, as an audience, we feel seen and heard. And then we're like, oh, we're part of this experience, for this clown, we're part of it. And then we also watch the show take a different direction based on what we felt. And now we're collaborators in that moment. And so now you have the whole audience, whether they know it or not, who feels implicated in the success and failure of what comes next.
I feel like that's very kind of parallel with stand-up comedy, like because there's a lot of flopping for stand-up comedians, and a lot of stand-up comedians kind of get out of it because they can't handle the flop. But they don't want it. They don't want it. Or they can't acknowledge it, because if they acknowledge it, then they're acknowledging their own fail. Not just stand-up comedians, I think maybe in life, like that's a huge life skill. Normally
we brush it off, or we're defensive, we shut off the person. I do a show out here, my bio was already too long, so I didn't want to add this. I was given the option, people listening, I was given the option to add more to my bio. I felt it was egregious already.
We had to cut it short. Sorry, Chad. So
I do a show out here. I've only done 2, but it was a show I've been thinking about for years called Stand Up and Clown. And I take really good stand-ups who go in front of stand-up crowds with finely tuned material. They know how to shut down a heckler. They know how to misdirect if a joke goes poorly. They know how to not fail. And then I live direct them through clown exercises where they have to sit in these flops and fail. And the show's electric. Like you can feel that they are, by agreeing to the show, they are going against everything they've ever learned and everything that has gotten them success through their careers. And because they are willing to joyfully go on this exercise, the show's magical.
And it's high risk, right? Going back to what you were saying about risk.
Yeah. And do the whole thing where in the beginning of the show, I say to the stand-ups, I'm like I say like, these are great stand-ups, listen to their podcasts, go see their shows, they're masters of what they do, and everyone claps. And I look at the stand-ups and go, enjoy that. That's your last piece of free validation for the night. It's like, enjoy it, because from now on, this audience is going to hold you accountable, and you're not going to be able to talk your way around or outshout an audience member. You're going to have to really earn their love and their laughter. And the audience is like, oh my God. And by the way, it's all bullshit. Like all of it, like improv's bullshit, clown is but it's a pleasurable bullshit. That's what games and play are. It's like, it's pleasure in assigning great value to something with no value is like how we like feel alive as human beings, you know, like we can't always be chased down the street by like a cheetah. Like that would certainly be exciting, but like we'd also trip one time and it would be over. We need to find ways to feel that sense of exhilaration where there really are no stakes other than the ones we agree to, you know, in the moment.
You guys want to play a game?
All right. Speaking of risks, we're going to
Okay.
play this game. Well, I've never played this. I made this up. So it's a conversation on a phone. And so I have a couple of, roles that I'll assign. And then it's usually like a customer and like a customer service person is the first conversation. And then the customer is going to have a dilemma. And the dilemma, this is where I try to make it clowny. The dilemma that the customer has is the customer has made a mountain out of a molehill.
Okay.
That's the problem that they're having, and the customer service person is trying to help them through their dilemma. That's it.
Okay.
All right.
So who's who? Who's the customer? Who's the
Whatever. I guess I'll be the.
How about we elevate it? How about we have someone who is the customer and the customer service representative, and then eventually it gets elevated to the manager.
Okay. That way we can all three participate.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see how this goes. All right. I'll be the customer service representative.
I'll be the customer. I'll be the customer.
Okay. I'll be.
And then you are the big boss, Jessica. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess. Or I'm just going with it. This is my first time, so.
Yeah. All right. Here we go.
Got myself on the back, no matter how it goes. All right.
All right. Okay. Thank you for calling Mountains Express. How can I help you?
Oh, hi. I'm so sorry. I love your hold music.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We had Eric Clapton come in and do a live session.
I was gonna say that's just bananas. I was like, this is Eric Clapton singing a song about this company. I'm like,
yeah.
Anyway,
we do it right here. We do it right.
I just I am not calling obviously to talk about Eric Clapton.
We do love Eric.
I do. I'm a fan. So I'm hoping you guys can help me. I have a mountain in my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Did
we put that in for you?
No. I wish because then probably it would be more attractive, and like and this is going to be where I think I'm hoping I'm calling the right place. I'm hoping to get it taken out. It was a molehill.
Uh-huh.
And I just kept screwing around with it because I was like, I don't, because I have a dog, and I was like, I don't want him to kill this mole. And this has been going on for 2 months. And then just like, I swear to God, like it wasn't apparent to me. And I woke up this morning to take my dog out to pee, and I was like, it's a mountain now. Like I've made a mountain.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Oh dear. That's that's a real problem. I don't know if we can help you with that. We create mountains here. We're not liable for that. So I'm just not sure if, I might have to get my manager on the phone to help you.
Look, my intention isn't to sort of, the only thing I might point a finger at is a tasty jam from Eric Clapton. Like that's like, you understand, like I'm like, that was a good time, but I desperately need some help here. And I feel like in being in the mountain business that you almost have a moral obligation, if I'm being honest, to sort of.
Right. But we deal with mountains, not molehills. You understand?
Okay, potentially it was a molehill. Just I don't mean to lose my temper a little bit. It was a mole. It is a mountain now. So
Yes,
by your own word,
that you yourself created, sir.
but you
know,
deal with mountains. That's just to take, I'm literally like, if there was a transcript, I could read back, you just said, we deal with mountains here. And I'm in a situation.
Well, we deal with mountains, but we don't deal with people who have made mountains out of molehills. And I think that I can direct quote you by saying that that is exactly what your situation is.
Well, I mean, I guess you could ask yourself as a human being, I don't know if that's something you do in customer service or customer support. Do I want this person who I bonded with about music moments earlier, like had a real moment. We had a real moment. Do I just want to throw them away because they accidentally fudged around with a molehill with good intentions to save that mole's life? Do I really want to just push this up? Yeah, you know, I'd like to talk to your manager actually, because now that I think about it, you have been just evasive, frankly, after you boasted about wasting company money on Eric Clapton, by the way. Like that's probably that could have been someone's 401k.
I thought we had a moment and now you're saying it's a waste. Just a moment, let me get my manager on the phone. Please hold.
All right, thank you.
Hello, I understand you've made a mountain out of molehill.
All right, well, let's, okay, that's a strong way to start. One, I'd like to say, I love your hold music and I'm a fan of the company in general. I think you guys do really great work in the mountain business. Oh,
well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I am personal friends with Eric Clapton and Bob Seger as well is a good friend that we plan to have on our hold music soon. So
name drop. That's great. But I mean, I would do it. I would drop it. Bob Seger.
I mean, if you can.
I mean, no, I can't. But well, good for you. And you know what?
You go mountain climbing together on the weekends. It's
what? With you? Wait. With Clapton and Seger, or just Seger?
Well, Clapton can't really keep up. He'll get about halfway up, and Seger goes the rest of the way.
That's the thing, you know, Seger as a musician has always like kind of had that, like, let's get it done, right? Bob Seger, let's, you know, like rock and roll.
Wait, are you trying to create, like, are you trying to make me feel good about myself before you ask me for something?
It's interesting how easily one can make a mountain out of a molehill. Was what I was doing basically was a social experiment, which also worked on your underling, where very easily two well-intentioned people started with a small thing and then it built into something else and no one was at fault.
Are you saying it was not your fault that the molehill was created, or that we left Eric Clapton behind?
I did think that was a little cruel that you couldn't have chosen a smaller mountain and brought Eric, but that's your business, that's your life. I did not create the molehill, a mole created that again, and a mole who is in mortal danger because my dog is a rat terrier. And essentially what I did was I fudged around with it. I just fudged around with, you know, like I was just kind of messing around with it, trying to make sure this mole wasn't attacked or its children attacked. And then over time, to your point, I made, okay, I'm just going to say it. I made a mountain out of this molehill.
And help me understand this mountain a little better. I mean, do you have any donkeys or Sherpas currently on the mountain? Or
I'm calling scene.
Stupid. I'm glad I saw Katie nodding. I was like, oh, he keeps making mountains out of molehills. I was like, I'm just gonna keep making a big deal out of everything.
I love that you took it literally, like the mountain out of a molehill, because that could have been like, you could have made a mountain out of a molehill about like any topic.
Oh yeah, well, as soon as I heard it, I'm like, oh, that's for sure exactly what happened. Like, but that's a clown thing, is like, you know, what I was hoping to do before I heard the prompt was just like, can we treat something silly serious? Like, can we just, because it's both ways, like we were just talking about, Katie, like it's something silly is treated seriously and something seriously is treated in a silly, like we're always just subverting the expectation, but the expectation is clear from the audience's point of view, you know, so when we do it, they're like, oh, this is delightful.
I think another thing that's really interesting about clown, which is a contrast with improv, is that you know, improv is there is body movement and object work and stuff involved, but it's very dialogue heavy, I would say. And clown is, at least from the workshop I took from you, it's very, and we also did mask work, so maybe we could talk about that too, where it's not even, and when we did the masks, which means not COVID masks, but like an actual full face mask, you don't even have your face to express. So that was a really mind-blowing experience for me, because all I had was my body to create comedy. And that to me was so outside of what I ever knew in that. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. And you know, it's funny because I do love improv. Like I've actually been running auditions for this thing I can't talk about, but like I've been Zoom improving like 2-3 hours a day with just a bunch of wonderful improvisers. And I love the idea of like, we're just listening to each other and, you know, we're picking up on little things. But here's what you have to know about human beings is we are inherently lazy, right? Like that's why we love sweets, because it's like, this is the most calories I can get chewing the least. Like we're like everything we do, that's why we have bad posture, because even though like, you know, it's just, yeah, both of you, by the way, not you know, everything, our minds are always trying to conserve energy or get to from point A to point B the easiest way. It's evolutionary, right? And so words are the cheapest commodity of communication. And you know, you go through an improv program, you can get laughs seemingly quickest with words. You can get out of trouble with words. You can build a world with words. But what ends up happening is words are cheap, and the audience also sees words as cheap. So when they see you fully commit physically, then it's like effort. Now they're like, oh, this person, why do we love dance so much, right? Like dance is just so beautiful, and we're so like inspired by dance. It's just because it's like, we know how much more work is being put into the idea of communicating an idea. So I still do a show twice a month called Chad Performs Silent Improv. And then it's like and it's like people from clown, people from improv, but we do 30 minutes, no words. We have a musician, and we use I use a ton of clown in that. Like I'm with the audience a bunch, but like everything we do we have to commit to it. Like you can't be non-committal with physical choices, or they don't even read.
Yeah.
And when you add on to that we don't really speak the language of physical communication, we tend to have lower body intelligence unless you're someone who has trained in the physical arts or dance. Like we don't even know how to express ideas necessarily with our bodies. Then we have the risk, and then we have the failure and all these other things. I love we started doing this mask show in 2020 because the pandemic had closed down all the theaters, and we were like, well, we have to wear masks anyway. Let's throw on a theatrical mask too, and we'll do it in the park, because these masks are designed to help you perform for large groups without sound amplification. You know, that's why they wore masks back in the day. You could bring a bunch of people together, and it was all big body movement and big expressions on people's faces. And immediately, even though I was already a very physical performer, it became clear how much I relied on language in a way that wasn't doing me any favors. Like it wasn't making my shows better. Maybe it got to ideas faster, but is that what we're trying to do? Are we just trying to get to things faster? You know, I mean, I think we just really want to tell the most compelling story, even if it's a simpler story, even if it's something that like is 1/10 of what we could have communicated in terms of specificity and information. As long as that 1/10 is dynamic, isn't that the better option?
Well, and I think that's interesting that you're like, are we trying to get somewhere faster? Because I feel like that is such a value in our society, and it's,
Mhm.
and we, but so I think that there's a craving for the present moment. Like we're always, but we won't. But like you're saying, like with the candy and whatever, it's like we want to, we're lazy and we want to get there as quickly as possible or as easy as possible. But really when you slow it down or when you are can actually be in the moment, that feels what like you feel the most alive, you feel, you know.
Yeah. Also, from an audience perspective, laughter is a product of the release of tension.
Oh yeah.
And that tension can be momentary tension. I mean, when I do this silent improv set, I've had times where like it starts with us in the back of the theater, which is fairly narrow. It's like a long, wide theater, but we have sometimes taken up to 5 to 6 minutes just to get to the stage, just kind of looking at the audience, playing with the audience. And by the time a real offer is made, sometimes it's the biggest laugh of the whole show because we have just built all this tension.
Yeah.
And yeah, like tension is definitely another thing that when you're in a big improv program or you're in a jam, it's like, who gets to build tension?
Right. Yeah.
If you build tension, you're getting tagged out. Someone's coming in as a giraffe. Like, it's like, oh yeah, there's no, and it's definitely, I mean, we're in an interesting spot because I really want, and you kind of said that quote, us to rethink what we want to put on stage and worry less about how many people we can get into a class or how quickly we can get students to feel like, oh, see, that's a serviceable scene. See, you did like that's not necessarily the best way to learn something, the fastest way. And like, I just want students and performers, coming up as students to have the most gratifying experience on stage. And, how do we do that? I also don't want to lose a bunch of people who don't have the patience for it. But honestly, if we had to lose them, that's not the worst thing, is it? Like, can't we just keep the ones we want?
Sometimes I feel that way, but it's supposed to be a safe place for everybody.
Yeah.
I think we have just enough time for a history segment and maybe a little bit of closing remarks.
Yeah. Well, okay, so first of all, my source is Wikipedia. I'm just going to say that right now.
Sure.
But I wanted to, again, trying to get somewhere quickly. So I wanted to kind of think about and look into the history of clown, and this is what Wikipedia tells me, that there were ancient clowns of Egypt that traditionally served as a socio-religious and psychological role. And it says the priest and clown were kind of like the same person, which I thought was interesting. And then in the Sioux Native American tribes, they had something called the Heyoka. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. A type of sacred clown. I thought this was really fascinating. That did everything backwards or upside down or contrary to nature. So like, for example, if food was scarce, then they would walk around as if they were really full. And let's see. So, and it was kind of like their role in society was to help the society think about things that are hard to talk about or hard to acknowledge in their society. And then I also read that in ancient Greek and Roman cultures, they had this kind of rustic fool character, whose Greek name literally translates into play like a child. So there's like this kind of, we talking about like with Jess and her children, sort of this childlike. And then there was this quote, let's see, by the person who wrote the Wikipedia. So who knows if they're credible.
Can you do that? Can you quote yourself in a Wikipedia?
I don't know. I was confused, but I really liked the quote, so I'm gonna read it. I don't care. It says, the comedy that clowns perform is usually in the role of a fool whose everyday actions and tasks become extraordinary, and for whom the ridiculous for a short while becomes ordinary. This style of comedy has a long history in many countries and cultures across the world. Some writers have argued that due to the widespread use of such comedy and its long history It is a need that is part of the human condition.
Oh, and for those of you who can't see, there was a hand flourish.
What?
I was just saying, for those of you just listening, Katie had
Yeah,
a
there was
really
a hand
dramatic
flourish. Is
yeah.
that what that's called? A hand flourish.
Yeah.
Yes. So thoughts?
You know, I've heard about most of those, and you know, I'm always of two minds here, because I do feel like that last quote of this idea of like a synergy or a similar, like, I don't know, like, were they all, was that clowning, was like clowning is a difficult term, you know, in general. I mean, I will say that to this day, ritual in general, definitely the Venn diagram of like religious ritual, spiritual ritual, and clown. I mean, obviously you think about just being Catholic, and it's like, now you kneel, now you stand, like, it's very much an interactive process of like, this thing happens, and then we have this response, like we know the rules of what, like the math, like, and we find joy as a group, all being part of it. And some of my favorite clown shows have had a lot of ritualistic elements of like getting the audience to do a series of movements with the performer, or getting the audience to sort of yell something out at the same time, or make sounds at the same time. My friend Dr. Brown, I can't pronounce the name of the show. It's like 16 letters that don't make sense, just to be a dick. He did that, I think. And he has a great bit on a bicycle where he has all these sounds and these things that the audience then knows to say. And then he starts to mess with them. You know, he starts to change it up, and they're trying to keep up. And, you know, that there's definitely religious elements there. And yeah, like I think I related most with the Wikipedia author, who's the great clown author, Wikipedia author, in the sense that I do feel that there's a part of us that sort of contemporary society has decided has to die at the end of childhood, so that we can be responsible and, you know, be serious, and for whatever reason, the idea that both of things can exist, or maybe that they are simply translated into, now you're a Chicago Bears fan, or now you're in a bowling league, like whatever, like it was put into sort of categories that were more maintainable and controllable. And that to me is like the excitement of teaching. Even that's why, no matter, like, I always, even when I'm working, think like, oh, I can't wait to get back to teach, because there's going to be somebody who's never experienced this before. And I'm going to see that moment where they're like, I haven't felt this since I was a little kid. I haven't felt this sense of like wonder and stupidity and foolishness, that I do feel like it's like there's just a part of our brain that isn't being treated like this area hardwired to play, that just isn't being cared for, you know, and being activated. And once it's activated, it's like, oh yeah, that could be a part of my life continuously. It doesn't have to be just under these circumstances. I can find ways to be foolish and fun and joyful, and love the experience of trying things and doing poorly and all that stuff.
I think what this kind of brings up for me is, you know, clearly clowning has been around for a really long time. But really just in the last like 30 to 50 years, you've seen like the decline of, you know, coming from, you know, someone who hasn't experienced much clowning. People are afraid of clowns. People think clowns are stupid. People are like, oh, like that's played out. I think in the 70s, there was just like this love of clowns that kind of happened. People had clown doll, like there was, then It, you know, Stephen King's It came out.
And do us any favors.
Yeah, there's this whole thing around clowns that kind of changed the way that our society views it. But like in the grand scheme of time, clowns were actually kind of held up a little bit more on a higher level.
Also, you have to, unfortunately, because the 1900s were a real rough century, because that's also when blackface, that's us. Like,
yeah,
blackface is clown work, and like clown work just couldn't make a right step through most of that, you know. And I mean, I guess you could look at stuff like Cirque, and I think though a lot of it is, I think it's just that sometimes things become popular and they overstay their welcome in that form, you know. Like there was a time when kids loved, you know, in the 50s, you know, Bozo the Clown, or 60s, you know, like, and then that just stayed too long. And then it, you know, everything becomes a parody of itself. Everything becomes twisted when the world changes, but the art doesn't change. Like, you know, music, look at music so like fluidly changes as we change. And like clown is the same. Like we have the same obligation to reflect the world as it exists now.
Well, and I also, oh, sorry.
No, I was like, that's just right now, clowning has to reflect like our experience and the way it looks. That's also.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's just like things get, even music and other art forms, they get boxed into something too, where it's like, oh, clown, that conjures up a certain, you know, set of visuals or set of feelings or whatever. And, you know, to kind of break out of that, or like, you know, top 40 music, you know, it's like this it can become very narrow. And so that's why when I tell people, oh yeah, I'm in a clowning group now, I always laugh as soon as I say it, because I already know what people are thinking when they hear that word, you know, and it's not super positive, and they're like, what are you, you know, like, but so I
the
think
word clown has even been like derogatory in some cases, like stop being a clown, you know.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. And you know, there was a long stretch in LA, I mean, and I would guess, I just can't speak for the rest of the country, where, you know, the reason the Idiot Workshop is called the Idiot Workshop is because clown was a dirty word. And like there was my friend Deanna Fleischer, who's a great clown, she had the naked workshops. Like everyone was trying to find and I think coming out of the pandemic, at least where we are, it's like we're like, I don't want to say we're taking it back, but it's just like we're too exhausted. Like we need some foolishness right now. This is what we do. We do it differently. Just like a musician today you wouldn't be like, you mean like Chuck Berry? You're like, no, I'm a musician in modern time. Right. I don't know why I decided to slam Chuck Berry. Super talented. I should have brought up Eric Clapton or Bob Seger. That would have been the call back of the year. I missed a major opportunity.
You ruined the whole show.
The whole show. Yeah. So like we now out here, there's definitely a group of people who are like, want to be part of the counterculture and now clown again. But guess what? This is the thing. Like I rarely change. Like I've dressed the same for 20 years. Like I've had a fanny pack since 1999. Worst thing that ever happened was when I saw them come back in style. Because I'm like, this means there's going to be a major pushback when these go out of style, that they think that I have just not gotten the memo. And I'm like, I've been wearing this for 25 years. So anytime I see anything I do fall into favor, I'm terrified. I'm like, oh, it's gonna look like out of step in about 4 years when I'm just doing the same shit, you know?
Oh God.
All right, Chad, where can people find you on the internets or other places you want them to find you?
I post all my shows and workshops on my link tree, which is just my name, chad.damiani. And I am on Instagram. Instagram's probably the best way if you want to see pictures of my work. I'm the Chad Damiani. I could have had Chad Damiani, but I couldn't get that for Snapchat, which I've never used. So I moved to the Chad Damiani, and it's one of my greatest errors of my life. So the Chad Damiani on Instagram and chad.damiani. And then that kind of covers everything.
You've been listening to For the Love of Improv. Head on over to our website at For the Love of Improv for show notes and to find more episodes.